my talk and everything you've heard so far says your team. But think for a minute about who's on your team. Because I think going through my comments, it'll be more meaningful to you if you think about your own team. And you might be on a little startup team that's just you and one other person. You might even not even have your team formed yet. You might be looking for people to bring onto your team with you. You may be part of a much larger team, a consortia, a multinational, working with big companies, small companies, all kinds of people from different walks of life. But think about what your team is as we go along, because I'm going to ask you from time to time to reflect on whether what we're talking about from the research and from my work fits your team or doesn't, so that you can take away the nuggets that mean the most to you. So one word you hear a lot when you hear innovation is disruption, disruptor. So I just want to get clear right up front. And when I talk about disruption, I'm talking about something that substantially, and I want to say irrevocably, changes the way business is done. So this isn't a one-time switch and you switch back. This is something where once you've seen the future, you can't unsee it. Once you know a new way to do something, the risk of falling back into what you've done before is very low. Now this is different from a change program, because all innovation and all disruption is change, but all change is not disruption. Okay. And disruptors act on all different kinds of things. They act on products, and so up here you'll see the Amazon Kindle, which by now is almost a matter of fact, you know, oh, the Kindle. But do you remember when that was new? Do you remember even before it was new, when e-books and e-readers weren't even words we knew of? And a lot of people really thought it would, you know, be a long while before we stopped reading words on a page made of some extract of trees. Stop killing trees and start reading from your e-reader. Has the sale of books, traditional books, gone down since we've had electronic books? Anybody know? Not as much as was predicted, certainly. Okay. But disruptors act on products. Coinstar, how many of you know Coinstar? You've got a lot of change in your pockets, and you've got that jar on your bureau that has full of pennies and quarters and all your different coins. The problem that Coinstar was solving was people aren't really using cash that much anymore. People aren't paying with change. They're not counting out the exact change to purchase something. So you're collecting all this change, and you really don't know how to convert it to something usable so you can actually use it for its purchasing power. So what Coinstar did was they put machines. Now there is a way to take your change to the bank and ask the banker, if you go to an old-fashioned bank with real people, they throw it into a machine and they whiz it around and they come back and tell you how much it is, and you can say, put that right into my account. Okay, so there's a banking solution. So some people would say, well, there's not really much of an innovation or disruptive opportunity here, right? Because I mean, banks are everywhere. Everyone knows how to go to a bank. The process of going to a bank is fairly convenient for many people. They're going anyway. So you can kind of hear the voices in your head that say, look somewhere else for an opportunity. But Coinstar didn't. They said, we really think this is a problem. We see people who are not converting their coins into usable value. So they started these machines, and they put them at grocery stores. They put them on street corners. And you could just throw your coins in, and what would come out? A receipt, okay? Or if you wanted to get the receipt, you had to pay a fee, okay? So let's say I had $10 in coins, and I'll get back $9.50. Sorry, I'm talking in dollars, euros. But if you would say, instead of taking my receipt to get my money, which will then be mine, I will take an Amazon gift card. In which case, perhaps I'll get $11 back and a value on the gift card. Okay, so who's behind this? A consortia of different, and it wasn't just Amazon, many, many other. I could take a Home Depot, a Lowe's, a Sony, any kind of gift cards, and then I would get more value. So I'm coming in here with my change, which to me is really undervalued. It's been sitting around. I don't even think it's worth anything. I pump it into this machine, and I start getting back real goods, goods I care about. And what is Coinstar getting? Coinstar is getting a payback from the vendors who are happy to get their gift cards into your hands, because especially if you're going to go on their website or go in their shop, you're probably going to spend more than your $11. Okay, so that's a good thing. They're also getting data. So as I sit and I peruse all the choices, and I'm saying, do I want the Home Depot, or do I want Sony, do I want Amazon, what am I going to choose? They can collect data on me if I'm willing to give it to them, and again, that ups the value of what I can get from them if I'm willing to give them my personal data. So then they can see how we make choices about retailers. Okay, so something that was just coins in your pocket turning into bills that you could use for something has now become something where there's all kinds of real intelligence about decision making, about psychology, about convenience, about retail, about branding that goes through this. Okay? And it is disruptive. It's not just disruptive because it changed the way we think about coins. It's disruptive because it was one of the earliest areas where we really could test out this idea of how much will a person give you in terms of personal information and so on to get back some value. And these are relatively small values, okay, because you're anchored in thinking about coins when you're working with Coinstar, as opposed to if you're out shopping for a car and someone told you could save 75 cents, you wouldn't be very excited, right? But if you're out shopping for something that is only worth $6, $8, then 75 cents suddenly seems like a really lot of money, okay? Eyeglasses.com, they changed the process of buying glasses. You had to go to your optometrist and get your prescription and then go buy your glasses. There have been some really interesting innovations in 1 hour glasses, trading off convenience for sort of in the in-depth experience of having a personalized, someone kind of fit you for glasses and give you these kind of very bespoke special lenses that are more medical. They're really doing your job for you, as opposed to this newer way of thinking that glasses are sort of a fashion item and they're the first thing people see when they see you. So you should have 2 pairs, you should have 6 pairs, you should have 12 pairs. I mean, people now who used to have 1 pair of glasses and maybe a spare, which was their old prescription, are now changing their buying preferences and their spending and their inventory of glasses. Did we think this was going to happen? No, you go back and read. People thought we were all going to have LASIK and no one will be wearing glasses. How old-fashioned that we're still wearing glasses in 2014, much less having them be a big fashion item and something we're buying more of. So predicting trends is really difficult, and eyeglasses.com went on and started to think about the process. Could they make a web-enabled process for glasses? Is it something you have to try on? Can they put in, and now they've come a long way from their introductory. It's another great example of someone who started out with a product that was not ideal. And many of you are entrepreneurs, so you know you don't want to send your baby out into the world until it's perfect, but you want to hurry up and get it out there before someone else does. And once it's out there, you can start getting feedback. So the early eyeglasses.com was very clunky. It was sort of, what shape is your face? Well, if you don't know, look in the mirror. And if you see dimples, click this button. And if you think you're round versus pear versus oval, now they've got all kinds, now they basically can have you look in a camera, take a picture of yourself, and try on the glasses right on the screen. But that wasn't where they started. Okay, so there's a lot of process innovation that's going on around them. And then there's threadless. Threadless is a good example. So we've got products, that's the Kindle example. We've got problems, that's the Coinstar example. We've got processes, that's the eyeglasses example. And then we've got production. So threadless, which has their cute little nude no more slogan, is a company that crowdsources their design. So as opposed to buyers in the olden days recent times really, who would go out and look for what kind of fashion they thought would be selling and then make orders, this company is putting up options on their website, and they don't start producing until they know they have the orders, until they see that they have the customer support. So you can go onto their website and you can vote on what kind, and most of it's very, very basic, right? So they're at the beginning of their life cycle. It's very basic. These are just basically slogans on T-shirts or pictures on T-shirts and styles of collar, very simple changes. But if enough people go on and say, this is one we like, that one goes into production, and no one votes for others, they don't go into production, saving you from that problem of having inventory that you've created and purchased or you've created that no one is purchasing. Okay? But you can forecast that if they can get this right, they can go into all kinds of other production. And you've already got Zara and other companies who are very good at reading the crowd, at understanding who's buying what, in what color, in what size, in what location, and feeding that back into their production cycle. So you could have said, if you heard about the threadless business plan, why would you do that? I mean, it's kind of hokey. It's only T-shirts. You're just, picking a slogan on a T-shirt. How much money and time are you really saving? Who really cares? look how sophisticated Zara is, this multinational company that knows at any given moment which SKUs are selling and which quantities to which people. And you could easily kind of vote against or decide not to invest in this idea. And this is something I want to keep alive, because once we see the disruption, it's too late to go back and say, I wouldn't have funded it. I wouldn't have voted for it. I wouldn't have gone to work there. I wouldn't have supported it. Once you see it, it's hard to unsee it. Okay, so just looking at the disruption doesn't tell you much about the process. Once you see the Coinstar machine and you see how it works and you see the cards and you see the receipts and you know the logic, you don't really know what had happened before that. You don't know if their original idea was to have you go through the grocery checkout line and hand in your coins to the cashier and get something back. And it wasn't a vending machine idea, it was an interpersonal exchange. You don't know if the idea was to put all your coins in a box and mail them somewhere, like a Netflix idea, to some central location where they'd have a big coin sorting machine. You don't know what they rejected in their thought patterns. But that's what most of us as entrepreneurs and innovators and disruptors want to know. We want to know about the fights they had in the team room. We want to know who was really pounding the table to say, it has to be an interpersonal relationship, it's all about the person. And someone saying, no, 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 we can put it on a screen. No, we can have an avatar. Well, and at this point, a lot of teams break up. And do they break up in a really dramatic way? Like a telenova. You must go now. You are dead to me. No. What happens is the people who are involved in these teams are really busy people. And what they do is they just drift off and do other great work. Okay? Most of us can think of projects that we could be pursuing, and we're pursuing other ones. Okay? And the ones that you're not pursuing oftentimes are the ones where the team doesn't see it your way. There's friction there. It's a lot of work. It's a real hassle. And if you have the choice, even within an established company, you will work with people for whom the interaction is valuable, high impact, rewarding to you personally, and in a way, you're respected for your ideas, you feel valued, and you'll pursue those more than others. But most successful endeavors go through all kinds of permutations and changes before success. And some research that was recently done looked at successful projects. These are ones within companies that come out and can legitimately say, we are a success, on time, on budget, or high impact, or exceeded our expectations, successful projects. How many times do you think those projects had a near-death experience? Okay, all of them had a near-death experience. I can see some people who lived this. How many times do you think a project was repurposed, defunded and refunded, renamed? I think there were 5 categories of how it could be changed. Canceled and then had to be restarted. How many times do you think this would happen in a successful project? 3?
8.
3 years?
8.
8. Oh, 8 times. You're right. I'm right, almost right on. 7 times. 7 is the average, and there were plenty that had 12, 14. There were some that only had 3 or 4. There were almost none that had none. Excellent guess. Okay? But think of living through that, of coming home from a day where you said, I worked so hard on this project and we just lost our funding. Or we were so ready to do our launch and now it's been delayed. Or we were going in this direction, we need to make a real left turn. Pivot. Pivot is a nice word. I wrote one of my Forbes articles on pivoting. It sounds so great. It doesn't feel so great when you're doing it sometimes. It's like leave behind everything you care about and go somewhere else. And in that moment when you're turning, there's all that vulnerability because you're not really sure where you're going to land. But again, once a pivot's finished, then you can write the best-selling book, right? Because it's done, it worked. So what I want to talk about and think about, and I think where we mostly spend our time, is in that moment where you're going in a direction, you kind of know you have, most of you, when I asked you about change, you're not naive about the fact that you're going to have to hit up against some walls, make some changes, go through the maze, whatever kind of metaphor you use. But 7 times, at that point, even your best friend, even your brother, even your mother, whoever is your best cheerleader, is kind of saying, shouldn't you just kind of give up on that one? Isn't this the third time I've heard you go, that's gone down the toilet, or isn't this the fifth time you've had to go back and get your grant rewritten, or isn't this and you should just say, I'm not to 7 yet. I'm not even average yet. So I've got a long way to go. So, okay, so disruption does take a team. You hardly ever see disruption happen by one person. And we're going to talk about what is productive disruption, okay? Because disruption can be a lot of hand waving and crazy stuff, and it can be getting to that point where you have to make that tough turn and not making it, and then destroying value. And it's not just morale that goes down. It's real productivity. It's real resources that are squandered. So I'm going to say my working definition of productive disruption is it is innovation. Okay, so disruption on its own, making a break with your current business model, isn't necessarily value creating and high impact unless it is a true innovation. Okay. I'm a strategist, as you heard, so I feel obliged every once in a while I have to say, why do firms exist? Okay, so firms exist to create value. And what I find fascinating are all the different ways that we talk about this process. So firms pursue goals, and they can be financial goals or non-financial. You can talk about firms exist to find a need and meet a need. Firms don't exist without a customer, is something that's a very famous and very true saying. Firms provide what others cannot or will not provide. So you go find an open space in the competitive landscape. It's another way to think about firms. They exploit their own competencies. Forget what the landscape looks like. Let's look inside and see what I'm good at. Follow your passion, right? What do they say? Do what you love and the money will follow. So this is another way of thinking about it, that you exploit your distinctive competencies, and then that starts the process of creating value through transactions with others. Another very, very common way of thinking about firms is they match resources to opportunities. We've got people, production, capacity, patents, whatever, and there's opportunities in the world for us to go and exploit those, or start the other way. There are opportunities out there and we're going to match our resources and put our funding there. And the other way that is one of my favorites is just you bring a vision to life. I'd like to be able to make beautiful clothes and sell them to young children, or I'd like to be able to make eyeglasses easier to buy. I have a vision for this and I bring it to life. Now what I find fascinating is these are always firms create value. These are also the visions entrepreneurs have that spark their ideas. The very same thing that at the firm level we've been studying in strategy for all these years is really the heart of entrepreneurship and innovation. So every one of these is the same. You have a financial or non-financial goal that can spark your entrepreneurial thinking. Identifying a need in the marketplace and going after it, that's almost the Bible of what the venture capitalists are looking for. What's the core need you're meeting? Providing what others cannot or will not, again, the VCs, and just you as you're thinking about what you want to pursue, you want to pursue something that others are not already doing, or that if you do it, you'll have some distinctive competency to do it better or differently. You're matching your resources to opportunities, and certainly entrepreneurs are bringing visions to life. So the only difference is I've put in some blue words to sort of bring out the differences between just strategy and innovation, disruptive entrepreneurial strategy, is that you're pursuing your financial or your non-financial goals in novel ways. You're not just doing what everyone did before you. You're looking for needs that are really unmet, or needs that are latent, that haven't even been expressed yet. The product people don't even know that they need yet, or that they might want and not need. Providing what others cannot or will not, including your very own firm. So some of the most interesting new ventures spark from people who are already playing in the arena. They already are in the marketplace every day. They know the customers, they know the suppliers, they know the costs, they know the technologies. We have a lot of mythology about innovation and entrepreneurship that it's people from left field who come in and see things in a whole new way. But oftentimes it's people in the company itself who are just coming at something and saying, we don't do this, we can, we should, we could. A big topic of today is exploiting different people's distinctive competencies. It's one thing to say that you're in a team where you've got some really strong engineering skills, but maybe you've also got some great marketing or communication skills that haven't been expressed fully because you've been so focused on your ability to do good science or to do great engineering solutions. matching resources to opportunities in unprecedented ways. And that's why I tell some of those stories about Coinstar or about Threadless. These are ways, there was no really new technology involved in very much of this, but it was new combinations. And then bringing a radically different vision to life. In a Hollywood movie pitch, you often hear people say, you know, it's like Titanic meets King Kong, or it's like one meets another. And we used to talk about our elevator pitches in entrepreneurship and innovation as being sort of that, you know, I want to be the Walmart of eyeglasses, or I want to be the everybody now wants to be the Google of something, is what I hear a lot of. But, you know, back in the day, it might have been, I want to be the Sears of, you know, dairy products, or some combination of things people knew, because those memes are so helpful. The minute you say Sears, most people know, in the US at least, what Sears is. Here, it's a big retailer that mostly sells hand tools, like if you wanted to get a drill or a screwdriver, wrench, any kind of tool, or any kind of appliance. Okay, so it was the place to go for a washer dryer, or a place to go for an air conditioner. So with one word, I can collapse all of that into what I think it means. It's also a place you bring your whole family. It's also a place that usually has a really big parking lot. It's also a place where the prices are moderate. All that is packed into that brand word. So I'm not saying it's not helpful to say to yourself, I want to be the Sony of something, or I want to be the Nokia of something. But as soon as you say that, you're limiting yourself. Because you bring your whole family there, and it has a big parking lot, and the prices are moderate, and it has this mix of goods, and it was created to meet a past need, if you're going to copy them, you're going to be limiting yourself. And it's not that you shouldn't do that, you need to be aware of it. So we used to get a long way with being able to say, I'm just going to take two different combinations. They even have a memory of some kind of a flip book we used for innovation. You know, an idea here, an idea there, flip them in different combinations, see what you come up with. That can get you rolling, but that can't get you to success. You have to have a twist. Okay? And that twist is the variability, right? That's something new and different and unusual. And that can be refreshing. Wow, I've seen it in a whole new light. It can be really productive because you can cut away. I mean, we've gotten rid of so many layers that we used to have in terms of inventory management and all kinds of shortcuts we've got now from the consumer to the goods and the goods back to the consumer. It's inspiring. And there's a real collaborative sharing culture that's growing up around innovation these days. Okay. But when someone comes to you with a new idea, a great new idea for a new way to do something, how do you really react? Sometimes it's kind of annoying. Like, could you please focus on what we've already decided we're doing and not keep trying to change it? Okay, sometimes it's counterproductive because we are moving in a trajectory and, you know, oh, I just want to go look at that other data that we thought it was an outlier, but it might actually be the holy grail. Well, could we finish the analysis we're working on, please? It could be counterproductive. Could be really inefficient. Here we are trying to get something done, and here's this person going off with, you know, either focusing sort of obsessively about solving some problem for some customer or some need, or perhaps, you know, kind of daydreaming about some cool way the world might look in the future. And overall, that could be kind of selfish because the team needs to go somewhere, do something, get something done, have a meeting, finish an analysis, build a prototype. And, you know, the other members of the team or other people might be introducing more variability. In their mind, they're making breakthroughs. In their mind, they're coming up with the next big thing. They're disrupting in a positive way. So productive disruption is innovation, but sometimes disruption is unproductive. Okay? Now that's not the only reason that innovation doesn't go forward. These are 10 of the most common obstacles to innovation. And I just want you to see if you've ever bumped up against any of these. So too many ideas without follow through? No, nobody has too many ideas sometimes? I had a client one time and they came in with that. They said, we've got too many ideas and we don't know what to do with them. And it was really, there was a time, sort of almost 20 years ago now, I did an article with some colleagues of mine called Breakthrough Thinking from Inside the Box. And it was about idea generation. And it was a real breakthrough at the time. Idea generation wasn't what we were good at. But we've gotten really, really good at that in the last 15, 20 years. So a lot of people have too many ideas and no good way of winnowing them down. On the other hand, too much attention to detail too soon, and especially too much attention to metrics too soon, kills creativity. So if the minute I say to you, I'm going to have this really cool t-shirt company, and I'm going to put up these designs, and people can put up their own designs, and based on what my customers want, I will then make those. If the first question you get back is, what's your profit margin going to be? How much are you going to save over traditional t-shirt companies? How many different models do you think, or designs do you think you're going to have in your first year? And you can't answer any of those questions, that can really kill off the creativity, because depending who's asking those, and maybe your funder is asking those, or maybe your partner is asking those, you might go off and start digging into thinking about profit margin way too soon before you've really even got the interactive model with the customer worked out. Great technology with no application. We see that a lot. It could be you're just too soon. It could be that you're looking in the wrong place for where that application might be. Great application with no customers. And I've had people push back and say, well, then it wasn't great if it didn't attract some customers. But sometimes you can legitimately say that is really great, but it's too expensive, or there's inconvenience, or there's too many switching costs to stop doing what you're doing and move over to the new differently featured product. The new product is just too expensive, or the risks are too hard to quantify. You've always got the incumbents who sometimes can be very, very strong and stubborn and refuse to leave the market even if they're hemorrhaging money. And lots of them do turn around and make a comeback depending on where they're coming from. Sometimes you just don't know what the next step is. I talk to a lot of people who are working on something that's going well, but they're just not clear. And sometimes that's a pivot thing. They don't know where to go. And sometimes it's just they can see the future and they can see the present, but they don't see the bridge that gets me from here to there. Very common issue. No distribution channels for what you've got, or distribution channels that are blocked for one thing or another. I'm sure everybody knows the old IKEA story. That why do you get things in boxes that you make yourself? It's not because originally that they thought this would be a really cool idea. It's that the traditional channels of distribution for furniture were blocked to them. So they did a workaround, and their workaround then connected into this idea that consumers would be willing to put in some labor, driving down their costs, keeping your costs relatively low unless you pay yourself for labor. Gee, I just put together the baby's crib. I think I'll pay myself $40. But it's again that thing about once the disruption's there, once IKEA is in the marketplace, once people are having whole beds and whole rooms, whole homes basically shipped to them to put together themselves, you've seen it. You can't unsee it. But before that happened, there was nothing like it. Furniture was pre-constructed by specialized people who knew how to construct furniture, and then it was shipped to you. And there were actually lots of people who made money along that chain, in the making and the shipping and the delivery and everything else. And then the last one, which probably, these are not necessarily in order of how they come up in any given population, but lots of things are just not scalable. So you do often get people who are looking at, okay, if this works and suddenly my website crashes with the demand, would I be able to keep up? So you see, especially there's been some recent cupcake and baked goods companies that just have not been able to keep up with the kind of demand they generated and not been able to scale and retain quality, especially with organic ingredients or with people who, if their whole essence is that they want to be close farm to table and then suddenly they need to scale, that takes a much different approach to their supply chain, for example. Right, so let me ask you a question. What do you think about when you think about drones? So just think for a minute. Okay, if I asked you, what do you think about when you think about drones? And just you. A bit scary, okay. Worker bees, okay. Amazon, okay. Delivery, you mean?
Mid-air collisions in a couple of years.
Mid-air collisions in a couple of years. Okay.
Mid-air collisions because you don't have human error.
Oh, okay. All right, so what they're saying down here, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but mid-air collisions maybe, but no, because you don't have human error. Okay? All right, so we're sparking some things. So some is delivering products, some is the scary, risky bit of it. Some of it's, how will it look What vision do we have of the future? Anybody think of other things when you think about drones?
Privacy.
Okay, privacy. You know, if a drone kind of came through here, snapped a photo of all of us and hovered off, would we feel flattered, or would we feel, you know, kind of like our privacy was violated?
Star Wars drone army.
So here, okay, even the word. Okay, so here's something that is, it's sort of, you know, we always draw these life cycle curves. Drones are here already. Okay, but for a lot of people haven't seen one yet, but you can go to Radio Shack, or I don't know what your Radio Shack equivalent is, but you can go to a shop and buy a drone. And whether you can use it or not is a legal question in some areas, but you can definitely buy one. And online you can get all kinds of different ones. Okay, so when you think about something like drones, and I could have put up here human robots, I could have put up here voice-to-voice translation, I could have put up here 3D printing, I could have put up, you know, something about brain science, you know, some relatively new but understandable disruption. Some people have a bold vision, okay? And I think some of you were getting right here. We'll need new laws for drone use. We'll need to think about privacy. We'll need to think about, you know, liability on the collisions. Okay? These people are looking at the big picture and thinking about it. Other people generate ideas. Okay, like drones, no one said this one, but drones will replace taxis is one I've heard a lot. Okay, but then you have to get to the point of that means a drone would have to be able to support human weight, connect a GPS system, collect a fare. I mean, there's a bunch of things that we aren't really quite there yet with on this. This is very kind of out there, but it's bold. It's a bold idea. You know, it's quite different to think about that kind of an application versus the first thought comes out to be the vision of what the world might look like. Some people are even more narrow in their focus and more oriented toward solutions. Now we can airlift post-disaster supplies. Now we can get things to earthquake victims that we couldn't reach before in remote areas. Okay? I've got a specific need, and I can see how this can meet my need. And some people make bold commitments. Sort of, I don't know, but they seem like they're going to be a really cool big thing, so I'm going to repurpose a team. I'm going to put some money against it. I'm going to find out more about it. Okay? Now, we could have a great discussion about drones. We could say, let's pretend we've got $5 million and the rest of today to work out a drone project. But a lot of times this happens on teams, and the person who's so concerned about privacy or risk or the big picture vision has a hard time relating to the person who just wants to figure out how, whether the box that the emergency supplies come in is waterproof and crash resistant. Okay, so at different levels of specificity, and some people really don't want to move to action. They want to conceptualize something that's so new and different, and other people really can't conceptualize it until they get their hands dirty and do some work around it. And that causes team conflict. It doesn't often come out as team conflict. It comes out as great discussions that might go nowhere. Or it might come out as discussions that are just frustrating because you can't get somebody to come down from 10,000 feet to where you are, or you can't get them up out of the weeds to be able to talk at the level you want to talk at. So step one is to realize you're one of these people, and you've got your own preferred orientation. Okay? Think of, what day is today? Tuesday? Okay, think of whoever you were with yesterday at lunchtime. Okay, got someone in mind? Doesn't matter. If they were near you, they were with you, they're having lunch with you. What do they think about when they think about drones? Okay? So yesterday at lunchtime, I was with some music recording artists kind of people. Okay, what they would think about when they think about drones would be highly conceptual, futuristic, probably not applied, probably not very narrow, probably more in the vision category. Okay? We are able, with a very small amount of information, to make assumptions about what other people are going to think. Okay? Did all of you come up with a person when I said think of somebody from yesterday? Did all of you come up with a supposition about what they would think when they thought about drones? Okay? How many of you think you're probably pretty right? Okay? This is a problem. Okay, this is the problem. You probably are wrong. Okay? We make these big assumptions about what other people will think. We make these big caricatures. They're an engineer, therefore. We test people on this stuff. We test people on whether what they tell us they're going to think and what they actually think is the same, and they don't even know what they're going to think. Okay, so this is not something that's really easy, where you just say, oh, now I understand. I'm a commitment guy, and you're a vision person, and we're just going to have our, we're going to have different points of view. This is not easy, because we kid ourselves, and we take all kinds of shortcuts, and we don't really know what we think about these kinds of creative things until we think them. You could take something much more mundane, like meatloaf or tea. And what do you think about when you think about tea? We'll be better at that because we've had a lot more tea in our life or meatloaf in our life than we've had drones in our life. But we want to get better at being able to tell what we're going to think and what we're going to. And it's not just because it's what you're going to think. It's because it's what you're contributing to your team. It's what you're bringing to your meeting. But if you go in with preconceived ideas that someone else is going to think a certain way, you're kind of cluttering up the interaction with them. So in a way, it's good. You're trying to say, I'm trying to get in the other person's head. I'm trying to understand how they might come at this problem. But if you go so far as to say, on 10 seconds of thinking, I've got it, slow down, because you're probably not quite right. We do find that most people break into these four quadrants where people are either high or low on their action orientation. Some people want to get out and try things, and other people want to sit and reflect and think about things. Again, shortcut, you could say, academics are much more thoughtful and engineers are much more doers, but it doesn't always break that way. On this other side, we've got high and low focus, and this does not mean ADD and attention deficit or anything like that. This just means your span of focus. So if you've got a low focus, that means you're taking the big picture perspective. Okay? If you've got a high degree of focus, you're much more narrow and specific in what you're thinking about. And this might be because of your training. If you've only ever worked in not even just agriculture and food, but you've only worked in dairy and you've only worked in spreadable snacks or something, you're going to be more narrow than somebody who's coming at food, healthcare, professional services, manufacturing, the world. That's not a good or a bad thing. It's just a fact that some people have a different frame of reference. So the frame of reference you bring or your team brings and the degree to which you're action-oriented versus conceptually oriented are the biggest factors. I mean, you can split by lots of things. These are the biggest factors that split teams. And they break into these four groups that I've already mentioned: solutions, commitments, visions, and ideas. Okay, so the people with the commitments are those who are highly motivated to act. I will take my team, I will take my money, I will take everything out of my bank account and I will put it into plastics, drones, 3D printing, robotics. They have a big picture perspective. They're not automatically saying, I'm going to put it into drones for emergency vehicles. They may be saying, I'm going to put it into drones full stop. And I'm going to get a bunch of smart people to figure out what to do about that. So these people tend to be people who will start what we used to call skunk works, go off to the side and just start messing around with stuff. A lot of them are founders and entrepreneurs. These are people who are risk tolerant, and they tend to be willing to put their money where their thoughts are. Okay. Can any of you think in your life of someone who fits this profile, or maybe it's you yourself, who you see them making big commitments? I mean, Tony Say from Zappos is a person like this. Has an idea, puts money behind it, tries it out. Has lost a lot of money in the process, but every once in a while it hits big. Willing to, I think he mortgaged his house twice just, after losing $40 million. But of course, he'd already made $100 million. So I mean, it's a different calculus than my bank account. But so how many of you know someone who fits this profile, or are someone who fits this profile? Okay. Yeah, if you didn't, I'd be surprised. I mean, almost everybody had hands up, or a majority. I'd be surprised if you didn't. This is a very necessary and common profile for really getting your innovation team to work well. If you're looking at your innovation team and you don't have somebody who's willing to say, let's write the check, let's get on the plane, let's make the prototype, let's get out there and try something, or let's get in the mix, let's go in that direction, let's follow along and see, let's monitor some people here are just monitoring what's going on in the industry. You know, find out who's starting up, going to conferences, coming to things like this. The second type, though, is a person who has a bold vision. This is a real thought-oriented person. Not so motivated to actually act, very, very interested in how things work. Okay? Big picture perspective. You often see these people sort of as the provocateur, as someone who's digging in and saying, why can't we? Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't this work? Looking at the glass half full and half empty and saying, why is it in a glass? Okay? And they become a good expert critic. These people are very good at evaluating plans that other people make. Okay? Because they have this broad perspective. They might say, well, that might work in spreadable snacks, but it sure wouldn't work in salty snacks, and it will definitely not work in medical devices. Okay? So they're looking across this big picture perspective. They know a lot of, hopefully they know a lot about a lot of things. They at least know a little about a lot of things. And they're very thoughtful. So they're coming up with sort of some theory. They're seeing patterns in data. How many of you have somebody like this on your team, or you are this person? Okay, a lot of you again. These people are so useful. These are the kind of people who bring together these disparate ideas from one industry to another. They say, well, this has been going on for years in one industry. We've never tried it here. And then when you do, it might not immediately work, but it changes everything. Okay, so these people with the broad perspective are incredibly valuable, but they're also kind of annoying. If some of you are this person, I'm sorry, but they are kind of annoying because they can almost always see yet another thing. They don't like to stop and say, we're done now, or we're going to go to press now, or they kind of always say, but, and, which can be great if that's what your team needs. The other group that has a low motivation to act, but is much more specific, are the people who have those bold ideas. You know, so this is the person who say the idea. Remember, the drone idea is going to deliver the emergency supplies to the earthquake victim. This person is great at saying, let's get this up on Kickstarter right now. I'm going to make a prototype. I'm going to get people connected to me. I'm going to get some money. We're going to go. Okay. The problem is they don't really go. They're really a good thought partner because they can see how it would all work, but when it gets into the real details of how to make it work, they often don't. They're just not motivated. They don't necessarily want to take their idea and bring it to commercialization. They don't necessarily want to take their idea and limit it and constrain it. They want to understand it. They're very idea-generating machines. Okay? They can find 10 ways to do something, and they're focused. They often have very specific, deep knowledge of an area. They can tell you what will and won't work. A lot of people in biomedical engineering are this kind of people. A lot of people who have a very long education process to get where they are. Okay? So these folks are great as a thought partner. They're great at getting something started. They don't necessarily carry it through to completion. Okay? So how many of you know a person like this, just sort of the idea factory person, or you are that person? Okay? Deep expertise, lots of ideas. Okay? These are great to have on your team too. So you're getting the trend here. None of these are bad. It's not like get this person and vote them off the island. No, these are people you want on your team. You just have to understand what makes them tick and how to work with them productively. The last type is really action-oriented. They tend to be these tenacious problem solvers. They will not give up. They're like a terrier with something in its mouth. They just will not give up. And they tend to be really passionate about bringing something to life. They want it to work. They're the one who, they were, as a 6-year-old kid, they were taking apart stuff in your house and like making different things out of it. They want solutions. They're very specifically focused. These are mostly engineers, but not solely. A lot of doctors, a lot of people who are, again, very highly educated in their field. They understand the science of it or the technology. They understand the background. They understand how customers really act, and they understand purchasing behavior. They might understand branding and marketing really well. It doesn't have to be scientific and engineering oriented. But they want to do something. And they're fine with You know, you got 20 ideas, you can keep on until you got 100. I liked idea number 2. See ya, I'm going to go work on that. And they kind of go hive away and go work on things. This can be really frustrating. In this book that I wrote with Jay Barney, it's a young guy who learns how to be a consultant. And one of the things he does is he gets this great idea and he goes off by himself and works on it. You know, but he's on a consulting team. And he's this kind of a person. He goes off and he gets really, and he's going to be so proud to be able to show his answer to everybody. And he's really intent and really tenacious, and he stays up practically all night working on this thing, and brings it back to the team, you know, really happy. That could be great, right? Except if you're on a team, maybe it's better to let the team know you're doing that and decide if it's something the team really wants to see, whether they're doing something that's totally redundant, and whether they're going to appreciate all this work. So this can be both a good and a bad kind of a contributor. A terrific contributor, because once in a while you literally go home at night and come back the next morning. And have any of you seen this movie called Elf? It's a Christmas movie. There's one point where everyone goes home from the it's a big, it's like Macy's or something, it's a big shop. Everyone goes home and they come back, and in the night the elf character has decorated the entire store for Christmas. Beyond anything you could ever imagine, with, you know, everything from the trees are fully decorated, there are doilies, there are snowflakes, there are, you know, I don't know, he went and killed, stuffed, and mounted some reindeer. I'm not sure what he did, but it was more than you could ever imagine anyone could do overnight. And once in a while, these kind of people come up with that kind of stuff. You go home and have a good night's sleep, and you come back and they've cracked it, and they come up with a huge leap forward. So I don't want to discount them, but it can also be that they spend a lot of time spinning their wheels, and it frustrates them because people don't appreciate them. So how many of you are or know someone like this? Okay. So these are pretty typical kinds of people. We all, you know, and you might be a mix. You might be saying, well, I raised my hand 4 times. Maybe you're seeing parts of yourself in all of this. Okay? So back to my question about what is productive disruption. Productive disruption is when all these types of people can find a way to work together to innovate. They can respect the differences they have, they can find the complementarities, and the actors and the thinkers can work collaboratively in productive ways, and the people who are specific and the people who are generalists can work together in productive ways. And the worst thing possible, if I go back for a second, is if everybody would join together in the middle. Okay? This is not a kumbaya moment. We don't want everyone who sort of thinks a lot to start acting a little, and if they act a lot, to back off. We definitely don't want people who have specific knowledge to become more of a dilettante, and we don't want people with broad knowledge to go back to school and learn something more. That's not the point. The point is not to make everyone homogeneous. The point is to celebrate and understand this heterogeneity on your team. And when you need ideas, go to your idea guy. And when you need a big vision, go to your vision guy. And when the solutions guy is really talking specifically and you're like, oh, there goes Gary in the weeds again. And you kind of wait till he gets off of his rant. Recognizing yourself, wait a minute, this is what Gary's good at. Okay, do we need it right now? Can I give Gary some coaching to say, Gary, love what you're doing, you're great at it, we don't need it right now. Step away from the whiteboard, you know. But if you can be in this meeting and instead of just saying, oh yeah, we almost had it pinned down and then so-and-so took it off on another flight around the room. Okay, slow down. That's one of this person's towering strengths, maybe, that they're really visionary or they've really got these bold ideas. And maybe that person is you. You know, the meeting's getting kind of boring. You're the kind of person who really likes to generate stuff and it's kind of coming to a close. You've had your 100 ideas, got it down to 50, got it down to 20, got it down to 3, getting ready to do your pitch. You're working on the 4th, you know, permutation of the business plan. You're ready to shoot yourself. You're so bored. Okay? You want to get out there and make some more ideas. Well, what you've contributed to the team was really important. There'll be a time when they need you again. And maybe you'll have to kind of do something that's not your favorite activity. But recognize that doesn't mean you don't get to do that again. Doesn't mean it's not wonderful and valued. And don't let yourself kind of drift into the middle. The 2 big mistakes are people drift into the middle and start to be average. You know, they tell you, look at your diary. Spend exactly half your time thinking and half your time doing. Add up the minutes that you spend doing each and then balance off your schedule. That's never going to really work for a true entrepreneur or a true innovator. But if you're spending 99% of your time thinking, 1% of your time doing, and nothing's getting done, maybe then it's time to do a little rebalancing, or get someone on your team who likes to do things. Okay? Find people who are complementary to you, who they fit the opposite to you. So some really productive teams are all the same kind of people, but very few. What you often see is that those kind of people are attracted to each other, they have a lot of fun, but they don't necessarily really make the breakthroughs. And if you go back and look at successful teams, successful innovations, great partnerships, the people who collaborated really well and had impact, they tend to fill out the entire spectrum. Okay. So you want the bold commitments and the bold vision. You want the person who's going to come up with the idea and the person who's going to prod and poke and criticize. You want someone who's ready to take it to market and somebody who's going to say, wait a minute, I've got a new idea of how we might tweak it or change it before we go to market. And respecting who's bringing what to the meeting at what time. And I don't literally mean the meeting. This could be people who are your customers. You might be ready to go. You're bringing something, and the customer's a real idea person. They're spouting off 16 ways you could change the product. Some people go back from that customer meeting and change the product 16 ways. Other people stop and say, well, that was a really interesting meeting, and that person's a great idea generator. I wonder what need they really want us to meet. And don't just go to 16 directions because you heard them, but stop and think about the orientation of the person and what your response to that person could be. That response could be follow their lead. It could be resist or coach. It could be adjust your own personal style. But in the end, you're going to have a better collaboration and you're going to have a much more productive team. So to really harness the value from your innovation team, you first have to know what makes them tick, what motivates them, and how they come at the problem. And when you're the least inclined to really engage and listen is probably when you need to do it the most. So there are traits of disruptors, and I have found, because I went and tested this out, I have found literally thousands of articles telling you that to be a great disruptor, you really need to be an optimist. You need to disregard risk, be willing to think the world is a place of infinite opportunities. You can find just as many articles that tell you you have to be a skeptic. You have to be paranoid, and you have to be suspicious. And if you've got any ounce of Pollyanna in you, you will never succeed. Okay, so that's two of the things, and you'll quickly get the point that these are opposites, pulling you in different directions, but each of them has validity. Okay, so there are many, many things that say that adrenaline junkie, busy, go, go, go personality is the best kind of creative entrepreneur. And there are many who say, conservative, slow and steady, look hard at the problem, don't give up, persevere, 7 or 8 times you've got to change your product, keep going. Okay, they're both valid. You get the person who's the provocateur, wants to get in and mix it up and have that verbal sparring, and then there's the person who's very facilitative. Oh, Jenny, we haven't heard much from you today. Oh, Gary, would you like to say more about that? We need both, but they're different, but both valid. Some people are very unstructured and creative. Others are very buttoned up and rigorous in the way they attack problems. And then some are big picture and some are down in the details. So you can see that a lot of this was reflected in the very broad chart. So the broad chart is only cutting the population in 2 ways, by thinking versus acting and by specific versus narrow, or broad versus specific focus. These are even yet more ways that are useful in looking at yourself and your team. Do you have kind of a propensity of people who tend to be conservative and you need someone to stir you up with a little more adrenaline? Do you have a lot of optimists and what you've done is kind of be a little too optimistic as a team and you need some skepticism to pull you back? Now that doesn't have to be another person added to your team. It could be just a pose that some of you take on to play the devil's advocate or to push back on some of the more excitable folks in your team. Do you have enough facilitation on your team? Is every meeting sort of a scrum, and you kind of sometimes need somebody to, even a third party, to come in and say, we're going to have a facilitated meeting and make sure we really hear all the voices and we get our agenda taken care of? Okay, so each of these, again, don't go to the middle. What you don't want is a group where everyone is smack in the middle. They're neither, what I would call an adrenaline junkie nor a conservative person. What you don't want is somebody who's right in the middle, always looking at the middle range and never the big picture and never toggling down to the little details. So the middle is a dangerous place here, but living in this polarity of having these two fully valid but different positions is really tough. And it's one of the toughest things about innovating and being a real strategic entrepreneur and working and managing teams of such people. Okay? And these are traits. These are hardwired. It actually is kind of hard for somebody who has a facilitative nature to be provocative or confrontational. They can do it, but it's uncomfortable. And so these, if you can actually test and find out, do diagnostics about where your team falls on these. That's what people do. The other thing we're most interested in is why they do it. Okay, so the motivation for why people act is different. Some people act out of self-expression. They're very creative. They don't care that much about money or status or anything else. But money and status and a sense of belonging to your community are all valid and very common motivations. So again, not judgmentally saying right and wrong, but knowing where you are. Motivations are what convert your tendency to act to your actual actions. Okay? You're actually seeking status, or you're actually seeking to get paid, or you're trying to join a community. Or, safety and security and comfort are another very, very powerful, sort of at the base of, this isn't Maslow's hierarchy, but it's suggestive of such. So you've got what you do, why you do it, and then how do you see the world? Okay, so just like any child entering the world, what they do, maybe they tend to be curious, and what makes them tick is, safety and security. But how do they see the world? Do they see the world as a safe place to go exploring, in which case a curious kid who wants safety and security would go explore? Or do they see the world as a nasty, dangerous place, in which case a curious kid who wants to seek safety and security would stay home? This explains a lot, right? How you see the world. Some different ones up here. Some people see the world as a place where there are no bad ideas. Everything's good. I want to hear it all. I want to see it all. Other people have issues with authority. Others see the customer as the focal point, and the customer is really telling them what's right. Those are the people who go to the customer meeting, hear the 16 ideas, and go home and make 16 different prototypes. Okay? That explains a lot. That's how they see the world. The customer is right. I must listen to the customer. As opposed to the data is right. I must listen to the data. Or I am right. And we definitely know some people who think that way. I want to make my family proud is a very different way of seeing the world, as very family-centric, as opposed to your field or excellence, winning awards. You can start to see why people put together the particular kinds of ventures that they do. So if you, for example, I just did 3 of these up here. If you said, who am I? I'm a big picture thinker. How am I motivated? I'm motivated by power. And I see the world with a customer focus. Maybe I'd be the person who developed the company Waste Management. If you know about Waste Management, they were a roll-up. Lots and lots of little garbage dumps, mostly what we'd call mom and pop, small, regional, even at best regional, even very local. And Waste Management was a play to roll them up into a more efficient system that was scalable and now global. It was started out as national. Big picture thinker, motivated by power, going and buying out people, spending a lot of money, very rapid roll-up, but focused on the customer and always thinking about what do people need in the area of waste management, garbage disposal and such. On the other hand, with the same IQ, with the same sort of test scores, the same kind of university degree, someone who is creative and motivated by status as opposed to power or money, but with a tech focus, instead of looking at the customer, they're looking at the technology, maybe they would have founded Linux. A very collaborative, tech-focused, creative solution to a lot of problems. The same motivation with a different set of attributes could come out totally different. So just one more. If you're detail-oriented, but you're motivated by fun, and thinking not about your customer as much as about your competitors, StubHub, I don't know if you have StubHub. It's, you know, you're bidding for tickets with instead of just scalping tickets, you can put tickets on a website and buy tickets for anything, and the market price is the market price. To the extent that, you know, you can watch, there was recently a tennis match, and you could watch the prices of the tennis tickets go up and down based on the weather forecast. When it would be a, you know, cloudy day when the Williams sisters were playing tennis, you could see the price come down a bit or come up a bit. But this is motivated by fun and competition. It was an idea that you have to, you're trying to break through a really crowded market of ticket sellers and scalpers and brokers, and how are you going to do that? Not thinking first immediately of the customer, but really with a competitive focus. And that's how StubHub came out the way it did. If we had a customer focus, it could have had a quite different front end and a quite different tech engine. So these configurations are going to influence you. You're better off knowing what they are and understanding where your team is consistent and where there are inconsistencies, and whether those inconsistencies are productive or not productive. Okay? So disruption depends on the situation. If you've just got board level approval, or you've just got, you know, InterTrade to fund you, or you've got some great thing going on, maybe don't disrupt right now. Maybe stick to a strategic direction and get something accomplished. Even the biggest innovators spend a lot of time on a steady state where they're working to follow their strategic direction. If you're really having some kind of a crisis on your team, it says corporate crisis, but it could be a family crisis, could be any kind of crisis, not the time to disrupt. And if you have more ideas than you have resources, you know, this idea that you have to match resources to ideas is a kind of finite thing. You know, we would love to believe that that money and resources do come to the best ideas, that there's a market for ideas, but it is such a crowded market right now. You're much better off to match your ideas to your current resources and build from the base. On the other hand, when you've kind of gotten into a routine and what you're offering is kind of the same as what everyone else is offering, good time to disrupt. If you're losing employees or you can't get people to join your team, that's a big signal. I was asked once, what's the most important metric of a thriving company, a healthy company? And to me, it is whether or not when you ask someone to join, they say yes. Forget the salary, forget the package, the benefits, the taxes, all the other stuff. If I have two companies, you know, if I'm looking at business plans, if I'm at an angel investor conference, I ask them, you know, do you have someone in mind who you'd like to join your team? You know, are they really excited, eager, and willing? Or the last 3 offers you gave out, was it an immediate yes, I'm here, I can't wait to start? Because those, you know, those are the real indicators. That yes, I will work for you bundles in all kinds of other things about your leadership, your technology, your competitive prospects, your customer focus, and everything else. When customers are fleeing you, similar. Not, to me, not as big as if employees are fleeing you, but could be just as important. Or when technology is changing faster than your firm. The saddest cases I have is people who really love their technology, love their products, love their customers, do a great job, but technology moves faster than they are. And so then you just kind of have to go through this, you know, grieving, denial, anger, all the stages, and get through it and get out and, you know, go to the next level. But that's a good time for disruption. It's a good time for creativity. It's a good time for collaboration. It's a good time for new ideas, vision, commitment, and solutions. So all 4 are important. Being more creative is not necessarily more disruptive. It has to be focused creativity. And if you just imitate what you see other people doing, if they are creative and big picture thinkers who take lots of risk and you think that's going to help you disrupt, it might not. It might backfire. Because you might have the kind of situation where you need to be down in the weeds, conservative, and tenacious. And that might help you succeed. So recognize and celebrate your own potential and that of your team. And then selectively and situationally, sometimes you want to be the provocateur, sometimes you want to be big picture, sometimes you want to be tenacious. The more you understand your abilities, the more you'll be able to turn it on and off really productively. And your team will just be so much more productive overall. So build your team. If you're adding people to your team, think about these profiles. And if you've got people on your team, understand them and have some conversations about them to help people understand who they are, what they're doing, what makes them tick, and how they can do more to make your product or your process or your company successful.